Welcome to Tiffany Turned On. I'm your host, Tiffany Anton. I'm a psychotherapist specializing in sex and relationships, hoping to help you discover current topics in a fun, sometimes serious, and educational manner. I hope to help you get turned on to life as well as inside of your bedroom. Current day, we're hearing so many things about alternative relationship models and that we're stepping out of the heteronormative and label of monogamy, which for most people isn't chosen but expected. Now, as we're liberating our mind and cultural support, at least to a small degree, we're able to find what are dynamics and what is love that fit authentically to us, to you and I. I want you to think about in the relationships that you're in, are you choosing monogamy or is monogamy an assumption? And if you are in a monogamous relationship and that is something that you choose, then you are right on. If it's something that is assumed and unspoken, I ask you to explore even in your own mind. Today, I'm happy to invite Trisha and Alicia to the podcast to discuss polyamory. And our main definition of that, of course, is multiple loves. Yet, under the umbrella of polyamory, which, mind you, is this huge umbrella, there's so many different dynamics. Welcome to Tiffany Turned On.
Thank you.
Trisha and Alicia have been together for 11 years and married 10. They have 2 children together, but they wanted me to tell you that they have many chosen children. In addition to both of them living in the home and 2 of their kids, they have a live-in platonic nesting partner of 7 years. And of course, I ask whether or not that person did some cooking and cleaning, because that's always nice, and we have that as a benefit of our house. What I'm interested in is, were you each identified as poly or exploring poly before you got together? Tell me a pinch about polyamory before meeting each other.
I will start with I've been poly my entire adult life. I stumbled into polyamory at 17 years old.
How do you fall into that? I'm falling into loving multiple humans. I just fell in this pit of human love.
Kind of. 2 of my best male friends in high school and I kind of just started experimenting together and enjoyed all of our company together and had wonderful interactions. So it happened. We're all okay with this. We're not upset about each other or jealous about each other.
When you started connecting to these 2 men, did you know anyone else that was starting poly relationships?
I had no idea it was even a word. I don't even know if it was a word that was used back then. So no, not something that I had ever experienced, known about. I was raised Catholic, was not a thing that existed.
Well, you are into taboos, raised Catholic and then loving 2 people at once. Maybe that's more Old Testament.
Yeah.
I don't remember how many wives that Abraham had, but in the Old Testament, we were able to have multiple loves.
Yes. Yeah. That was not something that had ever been modeled for me in any way, nor I had experienced or even heard of prior to that. It was just what was right for us, and we didn't really worry about it.
My entry to polyamory was a little less wholesome. So when I was in college in 2008, I was 19 and decided that I was going to start dating 2 people. And I was also pregnant at the time. It was a whole roller coaster of emotions for one summer that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth about polyamory, because it felt like it was just this constant emotions going on and lies of omission. And there was not a great dynamic happening in that relationship.
How many partnerships were you having at that time? You were saying in college, and then you said that you were pregnant. But how many relationships? Was it with 2 people? Was it with men, women, non-binary?
The relationship was with a man and a woman. But I had been sleeping around. I very much modeled my life after the ethical slut for a while.
That is Dossie Easton.
Yes. So I was in a very exploratory phase of my sexuality at that time. I was dating a man and a woman. They were much older.
How older? Much older. 10 years older. So they got some fresh young meat.
Yes. So it was not the most wholesome situation. And then when our eldest son was born, before I met Trisha, I kind of swore off dating for a while because, I had to finish college and had this baby and, all the things that go into that. And I entered the world of kink actually in early 2013 and was reintroduced to the idea of polyamory at that point from a lens of a more healthy, wholesome perspective.
Consensual, negotiated, educated.
Yes, all of those things. But also, you don't have to fight with everybody all the time.
That's a relationship goal.
So I started seeing these really wholesome polyamory relationships modeled for me less than 6 months before I met Trisha. And when I met Trisha, she was polyamorous and I was still kind of grappling myself with, do I want to be polyamorous? Do I want to be monogamous? What am I looking for in a partner? Mm-hmm. And when I realized that what I was looking for in a partner was Trisha, it helped make up my mind toward polyamory.
Because you were looking at a healthy model and someone coming in with a level of maturity and wisdom of which you did not receive, despite the past couple being 10 years older. We can be 20 years older and still have like coping skills and such as 16. So here comes Trisha, who has lots of wisdom, is a very grounded woman. And she says, this is who I am. This is my poly dynamic. Hey, hottie. Let's make out. Okay, I'm melting. Now I'm in love with you.
Something like that.
Okay.
Like that.
Not quite like that
at all. I'm going to just give a little bit more of my background because I aged past 17, believe it or not, as we discussed earlier. Not 30 years past 17 yet, but so I met my first girlfriend in college. We were both bisexual. And so we talked about what we wanted to do as far as our relationships were concerned. We both wanted to have the opportunity to still date men if that were to be something that made sense for us individually. As seems to be the case with any other woman that I am involved with, we have wildly different taste in men. It worked out for us through that time when we were together like 2.5 years. Following that, I ended up in a monogamous relationship for 6 years.
Was it a lesbian relationship, a straight relationship?
That didn't work out in the end. I entered into another monogamous relationship for about 6 months. That crashed and burned terribly.
Well, at least it happened in 6 months versus 6 years.
Thanks.
Fireworks and then plane crash.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. We were intended to be a friends with benefits situation and ended up with a kid together. And that was life for a while. That's one of our chosen children. My ex-partner and I fostered a child from 5 weeks old together. And that's why he's still one of our chosen kids. But after that, I was like, this monogamy is not going to work for me. I'm going to just enjoy life and see what develops in relationships. And that's kind of how I've moved forward from there to this point. That's where we're at now. It's like, I'm not looking for anything. I'll find what comes my way and fits, and we'll go from there.
So really an organic process for you.
Yes. Well, actually, here's the funny thing, because you were saying that I said, come here, hottie, let's make out.
Yes.
When I first met her, I had no interest whatsoever.
How could you not?
Because she's really sweet, but she is 9 years younger than me, and I've never dated younger, ever.
Right? So you had a little bit of a caution pause.
Yes. She was new to the state and new to the community. And I was like, hey, there's going to be another party this next weekend, so you can get to know some of the other venues and some other people. Would you like to meet me there? We met there, and we were outside talking to some folks, and I was not really engaged in the conversation. Folks that we were talking to had said something. And then she opened her mouth and my head swung on a swivel and I went, oh shit, her brain is hot.
Oh, that sapiosexual piece.
Was, yes. And that was the moment I saw her completely differently. Okay, I got to think about this. We became best friends very quickly and spent the whole summer together. We had kids the same age. The child from the previous relationship was with me most of the time at that time. And we ended up spending the whole summer together in a platonic type of relationship. And then one day I kissed her. And she freaked out.
A little bit, yeah.
For the whole weekend. It was great.
We were camping that weekend.
It was Labor Day of 2013.
Had you had any erotic thoughts or did you put her in the friendship only box?
When she kissed me, I had been spending the night several times, more than several, a lot of times,
4 of them,
in the bed with her. We were just cuddling all the time. And that morning, I woke up and she was like holding me And I was like, this is the perfect time for me to kiss her, but I'm too chicken. And I'm going to just tell her when we do finally kiss that this was the moment I wanted to kiss her.
Mhm.
And then she kissed me. And then I forgot.
Perfect. I love it. I
And then
love
I
it.
didn't talk about it all weekend.
And at that time, Trisha, were you partnered with anyone else?
Yeah, I had one other kind of serious partner at that time that we had been together for probably a year at that point, and then a couple of other satellite partners that I would see infrequently. But
So you had already met her other partner at this time.
I would say we had a very good relationship as friends. We would go to karaoke in particular together. Me, Trisha, this other person, even other people in our friend circles, and her mom came to karaoke once and all of us were there. It was very successful as a friendship, I would say. This kind of leads into one of our polyamory pitfalls, is that we have at times tried to incorporate other people into our couple's sex life, and that has been a pitfall consistently.
And I believe there's the misconception that if you're poly, then you're all having sex with each other. But I'm thinking about the listeners that, you know, maybe poly, we just have a lot of fun orgies. And what you're saying is orgies weren't part of our dynamic.
no, not at all.
They're kind of a hard limit now, maybe a soft limit.
I don't have that kind of limit. If you do, I respect it. We had a long-term relationship with long-term meaning, I wouldn't say long-term, but like we had full months where we were dating the same person, but it was hard.
Yeah.
It did not go well. So that relationship was very detrimental to our relationship together. In fact, there was some dishonesty on the part of the third person of what was being said to each person. Now, we try to respect the autonomy of each person in each relationship, because whether or not you're both dating the same person, yes, there is a three-way relationship, but there's also a relationship between Alicia and that person, and there's a relationship between myself and that person, and a relationship between Alicia, right? These different relationships are all nurtured in different ways and have their own interactions. We both broke a rule of not dating somebody who had been over a year outside of a divorce or a breakup of multiple years with a person, even if they weren't married.
Alicia, that's kind of one of your fairly firm limits. Whereas Trisha is like, hey, I'm open, yet is very much respecting your limits. Do you put yourself in the category of primary and these other relationships are secondary? What kind of labels do you use?
Can I answer this one first? So I use the term hierarchical polyamory to describe our dynamic as a couple and as a polycule. I do see myself as her wife and her nesting partner, and she is my wife and my nesting partner, as well as she is my M-type in an MS relationship. That has a certain level of primacy, but I really hate the word primary.
I was wanting to use some labels, descriptive, and whether or not you guys could break that down, just for people to kind of understand.
So although hierarchy within polyamory is viewed as taboo and terrible.
Well, what makes that one terrible?
Well, because each individual person should not be valued any more than any other. Every person has their own individual value. They bring their own things to the table. And that's why the big focus on not having hierarchy in each relationship has as much value as any other. Now, that being said, I think we both believe that every relationship is equal in value, but there's going to be a hierarchy if you have commingled your lives, right? So if you have commingled your finances, you have commingled and have children, if you have insurance together, you have wills together, you have
a formalized marriage
that you own together. Exactly. Well, whether it's formalized marriage or not, anybody who is commingling finances, purchases, habitation, any of those things, there's going to be a hierarchy there because you have day-to-day life with them and you have scheduled expectations with them, especially if there's children involved. So that does mean that to an extent, yes, there's absolutely going to be quote relationship in that it's the one you spend your most time in. It's the one you are nested in, the one that you exist in the most. Now, on another note, Brian, who has lived with us for 8 years, he's a wonderful human being that we both love dearly and has been a wonderful male role model to our children. They call him Uncle Brian. He has been in our lives, and I can't picture my life without him in it. Again, there are other partners that show up in different ways that also have as high a status, if not more, quote, status than Brian, because they want to bring more to the table. They want to be involved in different things. It's not a matter of the label itself. It's a matter of what the relationship develops into and what each person brings to the table and how they fit into the polycle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And also time is a finite resource.
True.
Love
is not.
You have to be the master of scheduling.
I'm going to give a little plug, but without having a Google Calendar, we would not be able to survive.
So this is time for this couple, for this coupleship, for all of us as a family. For you just in particular, do you have any like Wednesday is a date night, Sunday is a date day, or is it just kind of, it flows depending upon the week? Because I know some people do that.
We tried that. It doesn't work for us. Like, it's just not like giving up a whole day to another person that you can't schedule with any other partners with. The kids can't have expectations of you on. It doesn't make sense for us, especially having children. What day of the week am I going to give to somebody else? I just can't do that. We've tried that. It doesn't work for us. I have seen it kind of work for other people. If that's what works for them, fantastic. I actually had told one of my best friends who does do that type of polyamory that I will never give a full day to anybody ever again, that we will schedule what makes sense for us. We will work out times. We will work out who's staying where, whatever. It doesn't matter. But I'm not going to dedicate Tuesday is now for Tiffany. Like that's not going to be a thing.
That is just one example or two examples of many in the art of negotiation. That is a must in poly. Can you give any other examples of things that you've negotiated? You listed 2 that don't work. Is there any that do work, or what kind of assistance, guidance do you utilize to help you in the negotiation process?
One of the things that I think we do well is that I would not say we've added any partners, either of us have added any partners recently that we haven't known for some time. We do a very good job, I think, of pushing, do I want to not only be around this person in a sexy way, but do I just want to be around this person? I am a very community-minded person. So in a lot of ways, when I'm looking at, do I want to be around this person? It's, would I invite them into my home?
Yes.
Which is a certain threshold when you have children.
That's a big deal.
Yes. If I decided I really just want to go have sexy times with somebody and we figured out, that would be a whole negotiation between the 2 of us before I went and got on any dating apps or anything.
So it's not assumed. So that's an example of what you would need to come together to discuss. It isn't like free reign. Oh, by the way, wife, I'm going to see Riley on this night.
Not necessarily. If Riley is a known quantity, that's completely fine. But one of the main things that you have to consider in polyamory is your people, right? So making sure that one of the big negotiations that we both already had in place ahead of time was making sure that we are using safer sex, that if there's going to be any fluid bonding, it is discussed ahead of time, not only between you and the other partner, but between us, probably before we take it to the other partner. Most of the time, I would assume. I don't think it's ever been otherwise, and what the expectations are, because one, when you have small children, we're parenting together, right? It's not like you can just take off on Friday at 6 and be like, see you Monday, have a great weekend, because there are expectations.
That definitely needs to go in the schedule a while ahead of time.
Well, and that's the thing, like it's not out of the realm of possibility. Alicia went on a vacation with her partner last fall, wasn't it?
It was September.
Yeah. And I said, I got it. I got the kids. You go have a good time. And it wasn't a problem. We are really good now and this was learned over years of being together, of negotiating upfront what our needs are, whether it's time alone, time together. And that's kind of the hardest part, is because most of our time together is spent as a family.
Right.
Getting one time together is really hard.
I think the biggest thing that works for negotiating is being really clear about what your needs and wants are and trusting that you can communicate them to your partner or partners.
Not only that, knowing what your needs and wants are, trusting that you can communicate them, and trusting that your partners want you to have them.
Yes.
So that piece of compersion as well as a high level of emotional safety.
Like, yeah, you have to have partners that want good things for you 100%. And that's vital, like truly vital. So
I think that the most important thing I would say for successful polyamory is that you have to want your partner to be happy.
And to me, that's part of compersion. And that's more of a newer term to say your happiness even influences my happiness. So by you going out with Riley, I know you're going to go to this concert. You've been looking forward to this concert. I'm super excited for you guys. Yeah. And when you come home, I'm going to ask you all kinds of details about that concert. I'm going to high five you. I'm going to give you a hug. And I'm going to thank you for coming back and connecting with me. And for many people, compersion can be difficult because the natural tendency of jealousy. We have that sense of not necessarily that you are mine, but more of the, oh, you're mine, baby, you're mine. How do the two of you manage what is expected, at least in the poly community? Because people will think, well, aren't you jealous? You can't be jealous. No. You know, we struggle with jealousy within it. How do you work through it, at least in your example of your coupleship?
In the book, Polysecure by Jessica Fern, there's a whole section that talks about insecurity versus jealousy. And there have been times in our relationship where I have started feeling very insecure. Needs and wants maybe aren't being communicated by me and therefore aren't being satisfied for a whole host of reasons. You know, I really think insecurity can look like jealousy and can even lead to jealousy. Insecurity is maybe a larger concern that I have struggled with, and that can be solved with conversation usually. There have been a number of times where I have felt like things were too busy to ask for what I need. It would be selfish for me to say, hey, I want. And then that insecurity or that busyness leads to insecurity, which leads to resentment. Okay. Resentment is not a territory you want to be in.
Right. And in jealousy, how I look at it, of course, is that deep fear of losing the love of the other. And what I'm hearing from you wasn't necessarily that deep fear. It was more of the need for connection. Yeah. And if we look at the metaphor of we have a big pitcher of water, and let's say we have 3 partners total. Sometimes do we want out of the water to nurture all of the relationships?
I don't think that was what was going on when I have felt insecure. I think what has happened is other partners are getting watered in their cups, but I haven't asked for water. So I've run out, but there's plenty of water to be had. I just have to ask for it.
Oftentimes jealousy comes from feeling that somebody else is getting something that you should be or that you want to have. And that's when the communication has to happen. Communication is obviously key to any relationship, but it has to be brought to another level. The main thing is when you're in a polyamorous situation where you have multiple partners, and I don't think I've rarely had less than 3. It's rarely been less than 3. Communication has to happen. Like the expectations within each relationship, the communication has to be there. One person, believe it or not, cannot read your mind.
Just think about coupleships that are 2 people and how difficult communication can be. And now you've just add a 3rd person. And you have to be on your game, educated, exploring effective communication in order for this to survive. So if you're thinking about a poly relationship, then you need to step up to the plate of how can you improve the way that you're communicating to do so that's both transparent and respectful.
Absolutely. In the 10 years we've been together, we talk through, everything. And then Once we've killed the horse, we revive it, kill it a few more times,
Oh,
revive it
wow. Okay. This is
Then
a
kill
near
it again.
immortal horse.
until it's dead. And then if something comes up later that makes us think about that, we have that conversation to revert back to, because we've talked through all this and we can relate that to the previous conversation that we had, not bringing up what anyone has done or whatever problems there were. It's like, in this situation where I did this and you wanted this is what's happening here. We can reference that, and it gives us a foundation that we're building upon. But we really do talk through everything to such an extent that I don't want to say exhaustive, because it's not exhausting to do it. It just takes a commitment.
Right, to get to the base of it. And it's not just the communication with words. We're looking at your ability to listen with reduced defensiveness and openness to feedback. That we're not each other's enemy. It's not about you win, I lose. It's how can we best get into a win-win situation. When couples say to me, well, we never fight, I wonder about the passivity or conflict avoidance in them. I'm interested in, what about your disagreements? Because we have disagreements. Just because we're a different human from the other.
We disagree on things all the time. My least favorite words that I say often are, you were right. I would say that we have had disagreements that could have been fights if the two of us didn't have the communication tools to not fight.
And any of the poly books, you mentioned the Polysecure, and I think that's an excellent tip in looking at insecurity and jealousy. Is there any books that help with the navigation of communication within poly?
I'm going to take you back to Polysecure in particular, because it's centered around attachment styles. It tells you a bit of how the way you're communicating and what you're doing may be received from other types of attachment styles. And so if your other partners can figure out their attachment style through the book, then it gives you a new tool in how to communicate to each other and what those needs might be. We really love Polysecure. I've read it a couple of times. She's read it.
One of the books that I read in the relationship that I was in, and I recommend to many clients, is the Jealousy Workbook.
We have that.
Labriola. And I remember there would be some evenings where I'm sitting there on my own and I would have to go through the checklist in order to self-soothe. That self-soothing is another part of any relationship that we're in.
I've flipped through the Jealousy Workbook, and for us, it is a bit more monogamy centered where we are at, just because we had already kind of divorced ourselves from monogamy before we got married. The jealousy work does a great job of navigating maybe the losses that you would encounter as you transition into polyamory, and how to cope with some of those feelings of like, I was expecting this and it actually is, life is this. But that's not really where we're at. I want to plug a different book though, Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Glover Tawwab. I've read it twice, and that book has been hugely instrumental to my ability to advocate for myself, communicate my wants and needs instead of going into resentment territory, set boundaries with the people in my life were causing dysregulation outside of my relationship with Trisha, and therefore not bringing things home.
Yeah.
That one is huge. I would recommend that to any adult, honestly. But I also recommend it to anyone new to the community as a great starting point.
Another book that I recommend is More Than Two. Have you guys read that one?
It has a lot of good information, and I'll agree. One thing I wanted to say though is that, because we're talking about the communication between us, if I am talking with a new partner, and I'm gonna say the most recent partner that I added was almost 2 years ago. I tell anybody that I am getting involved with, look, I don't really do anything short term for the most part, not because I expect that you're going to be here forever, but because like, if you matter to me and I'm going to incorporate you into my life, I'm going to make the efforts, and I want you to know that. But I also communicate what I can really give, right? Like I sit down and say to them, these are the number of partners that I currently have. I have 2 children and I have a wife, and like right now I'm in school full time or I'm working, whatever the situation is. I don't have a ton of time. If you're willing to work with me on making the times work when it works for you while we're getting to know each other and everything, then I'm more than happy to give this a shot. I'm willing to get to know you. I like you, what I know of you thus far. I would like to see where this goes. And as time goes on and they learn what my life is and I learn what their life is, and we find where overlapping times are available, we incorporate them into what's going on in our world or our family dynamics and what's going on there. And the same on the other side, right? So one of my partners is getting married next May. A platonic life partner is standing up in the wedding and helping with getting the wedding together and the bachelorette party and things like that. But communicating up front what you can really do in a relationship, what's available at that point, and that we'll see where it goes and how things incorporate it and work together. That's vital when adding a new partner. But they don't understand what your life is now and that this is where I'm coming from, but I want something with you. I want to know you. I want to see what we can be. Then the expectation may be something that you're not able to give. So it's vital that you're communicating up front in that initial negotiation of what you have as an expectation from a new partner or from another partner and what they have as an expectation. If another partner were to come in and say, yes, I'm really interested in having a relationship with you. I've enjoyed our encounters. I want to be able to see you 3 or 4 days a week. I'd be like, that's wonderful that you want that much time with me. I don't see me 3 or 4 days a week.
Right. That's not what I can offer to you.
Exactly.
Thinking about my personality as an ambivert, I'm extroverted socially. I like being around people. And then the way I refuel is in quiet. And even in a monogamous relationship where I had a lot of love, we just don't always have the energy to give to the other person. And so when you're in love with a couple of people, I just think of how much energy that would take for the stamina really would be the word. And I know that I have kind of struggled with the stamina.
So I am very much an extreme extrovert. I don't take time alone kind of ever. My time alone is for me to work on school. And typically I have a kid sitting in the bed next to me while I'm working on school. Outside of driving to and from picking somebody up, the last time I've been alone.
Really? And here I'm, the opposite. I'm like, I have to have alone time.
Yes.
Now, I would make the assumption that Alicia is more introverted.
Very, very accurate. I would say that all of my other partners are more introverted.
Well, it gives you a good balance.
It does. It does. And, it works for me. And it works for them because
well, you give them a little bit of fire and spice and energy. And we know that energy is contagious.
Yes. Fire and spice. I like that. That's a good descriptor. It's one of those things that I think it's important that we, in the communication aspect, right? And a lot of the jealousy things often revolve around not communicating expectations or wants or needs. And when we build expectations in our own heads that we don't communicate, and then we assume that everyone else is going to just make that happen, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So if we have to communicate our expectations, especially if they are needs and not just
so this is what I need in the relationship. This is what I can give. And what's happening on your end with your needs and what you can give. And this is so much more than just, okay, our relationship's open, so I can go have a romp with Riley. These are, in your dynamic, meaningful relationships. And as you said, when you meet someone to date, you're not looking for that romp. You're looking for a longer connection with them.
I mean, I have a satellite partner whom I have been with on and off for 12 years.
Well, what is a satellite partner?
It's a partner that comes around when it makes sense, when their time is available for each of you and you can connect. They've been in monogamous relationships in between and moved to different places. It's just like things have not worked out for us to be able to connect for a regular, long-term, committed, regular, everyday relationship. But we still love each other. We still care about each other. That's never going to change. We've been doing it for 12 years. It works for us. It doesn't work for everyone,
Would you say that you guys see each other maybe 3 times a year?
More than that, because they're not far. It's just that person has more kids than I do.
And a busy life as well.
And more exes than I do, and like things that they have to do. And I think one of the important things that we have to realize in polyamory is that we are all human beings living life the best that we can, right?
Yes.
Like that's the thing is life happens to us and we make life happen, but all of us are doing that individually, and we can't expect that somebody is going to be able to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to, right? That's just not life. And so if you can respect that maybe this person has a lot going on in their life and they're not in a place where maybe this person is not in a position that they can see you regularly, that your interactions can be, intimate, or even, phone calls can't happen regularly just because that's where life is at. But if you love them, you care about them, you respect them as a human being, and you want a relationship with them, we have to be willing to meet each other where we are, not where we want to be. That's why, for me, the satellite relationships are important to me. Do they get as much effort as my long-term committed relationships that are incorporated into my everyday life? No. And nor do I get as much effort from them either, because we can't do things. That's okay. It doesn't make it any less or less valuable. It's just, or them less valuable as a partner or a person. It's just the way that works.
This is part 1 of a 2-part series of Trisha and Alicia. In part 2, they will be discussing how their coming out process happened. What is the role of obligation in poly, and is there any? What happens if we feel obligated? How in the world do we even choose a person to add to our polycule or add within our family arrangement? What is it like being poly and having kids? What's the level of disclosure or their awareness? Trisha and Alicia answer these questions about their life, as well as wrapping up part 2 with their biggest tips. The music for Tiffany Turned On is provided by Kumasi Afrobeat. They are New Orleans' full Afrobeat band. They play to make you move. KUMASIAFROBEAT.com to listen more. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead, like, follow, share with your friends, and leave a review. Any of the recommended books or items that you hear about on my podcast, you can find them on my website. I have a special tag for sexual resources and wellness. This includes my TEDx talk titled I Love Pleasure. I consider it free therapy. It's all at neworleanssextherapy.com. I hope you're here to get turned on to life and in your bedroom.